Part 3. Jesus said some of them standing there would not taste death until they saw the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. He was coming back in their lifetime. He said he would come in the glory of his Father with all of his angels, and then he would reward every man according to their works. Verily, some of them standing there would not die until he returned in his kingdom. That's what it said in Matthew. If you add Mark and Luke to that, he said, to them and their faithful or unfaithful, perverse, adulterous generation. If they were ashamed of him in that generation, then the Son of Man would be ashamed of them whenever he came in his kingdom. Verily, some of them standing there would not taste death until he returned in his kingdom. So Christians are looking for the Antichrist, but John said back then, he said, little children, it is the last hour. You've heard that Antichrist shall come. Even now are there many Antichrists. Thereby they knew that it was the last hour. Paul wrote to the Corinthians, he said, this I say, brethren, the time is short. Let those who have wives be as though they have none. Why were the Corinthians acting like they didn't have wives? Because the time was short, and you cannot say that that is for us, because the chapter starts out with Paul saying, hey, now concerning the things whereof you've written unto me. And he wrote them a letter back. They wrote him a letter asking him questions. He wrote a letter back. So what was written to the Corinthians was to the Corinthians. Paul told them that they would not all sleep, but they would all be changed in the moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump. They would still be alive until the rapture. All the apostles said many things, telling us that it would happen in their lifetime. Peter said the end of all things was at hand. So they were looking and hastening to the day of God, that their judgment had long waited, but now was coming on them swiftly. James was the brother of Jesus, and he said, go to now, you rich men. He sent them a letter 2,000 years ago. They read it. He said, go to now, you rich men, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you, because you have heaped up treasures for the last days, and the coming of the Lord draws nigh. Paul said it was high time for them to awake out of sleep, because now was their salvation nearer than whenever they first believed. He said the night was far spent, the day was at hand for them to cast off the works of darkness and do not make provisions for the flesh. Today, you got Christians, 401ks, college programs, always looking for the future. Back then, they didn't have a future. It was coming. The end of all things was at hand. They were gathering themselves together the more so as they saw the day approaching, because he who tarried yet a little while, and he who tarried would not tarry, but would come. They were not in darkness, that that day should overtake them as a thief. They were to be sober and watch, right? Be watchful. Do not sleep in the night as others slept in the night. They had people staying awake and watching, because they didn't know when the armies were going to come and they were going to have to flee, but they had to be prepared because they knew it was coming. They knew the signs. They knew it was happening in their generation. Paul said, who were the prophets written for? He said it was written for their admonition, upon whom the ends of the world were come, because they were living in the ends of the world. There was no word world back then. It was the word age. They were living in the end of the age. Lo, Jesus Christ was with them always, even until the end of the age. Romans 9:28. For the Lord would do a short work on the earth. He would finish the work and cut it short in righteousness. For a short work would the Lord make upon the earth. Jesus Christ appeared once in the end of the world to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. He was in the end of the world. He came in the last age of Israel. He came at the end. The temple was going to be destroyed. The priesthood was going to be gone. Their house was going to be left desolate. The whole thing, all of it was done. Jots and tittles, they all passed. We're not under the law anymore, but whenever the fullness of the times had come, Jesus Christ was born under the law to redeem those who were born under the law. It happened. He did his short work. Back then was the old covenant, waxing old and ready to vanish away. They were about to go into the new covenant, New Jerusalem. That didn't happen until they were in heaven. We'll get into all that as we go through the series. John in the book of Revelation. Just read the very first part and believe it. John, write that things must shortly come to pass. He was their fellow brother and companion in tribulation. Those who pierced Jesus would see him and wail because of him, like Jesus told the priests at the Sanhedrin. He said, after this you will see me coming in the clouds with great power and sitting at the right hand. Came in the clouds in their lifetime. That's why he said, O men of Galilee, why stand you here gazing? The same Jesus that was taken up from you in the clouds shall so come in like manner as you've seen him go. So again, John in Revelation, right? Things must shortly come to pass. Fellow brother and companion in tribulation. Those that pierced him would see him and wail because of him. That's a quote from Zechariah again. Get into that later. He wrote to the 7 churches in Asia which do not exist anymore. He was on the Isle of Patmos, the prison Isle of Patmos, because he was going through the tribulation. He told those churches to hold that fast what they already had until he came. Why would he do that? He said if they didn't, he'd remove their candlestick, their church. The churches were the 7 golden candlesticks. They don't exist. He removed their candlestick. We know that Revelation was written while the temple was still standing, because John was told in chapter 11 to arise, John, measure the temple, the altar, and them that worship therein. But the court that is without the temple leave out, for it's given unto the Gentiles, and they shall trample the city underfoot for 42 months, just like Jesus said on earth. Gentiles would come, trample the city underfoot, until the times of the Gentiles were fulfilled. It was 42 months from 66 until 70 AD. From the time the believers fled, the armies came, and then the temple was destroyed. When the book of Revelation was written, there were 7 kings on the beast. 5 had already fallen. 1 was ruling then, and the next one would rule for a short time. It can't be for today. It was happening back then. Again, we'll get into the kings as we go. So Jesus sent his angel to testify to the churches things must shortly come to pass. He was coming so quickly that he said, let those who are righteous be righteous still. Let those who are holy be holy still. Let those who are filthy be filthy still. Behold, he was coming quickly. He, Jesus, sent his angel to testify to the churches things must shortly be done. John, seal not the words of the book of that prophecy, for the time was at hand. And he who testified to those things said, surely he was coming quickly. Even so, come quickly, Lord Jesus. Now, Daniel only lived 500 years before Jesus. And he was told, seal up the words of the book of that prophecy, because it wouldn't be for many days, and it wasn't for the time of the end. John saw a lot of the same things as Daniel, and he said, seal not these words, because the time is at hand. Now, if it's not for 2,000 years after John, if Daniel was many days, right, 500 years, John should have been told, hey, seal this up, because it's not going to happen for many, 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 many days, 4 times the amount. All you got to do is tell the truth. I'm getting to an actual point here. Jesus Christ finished his work. He did a short work on the earth. He delivered the kingdom back to the Father. He became subject to the Father. Now we have God. He had the gospel of reconciliation. He appeared at the end of the world, the end of the age. He finished all that. After he finished his work, wicked men took over his name and made this false religion that we have today and stopped us from going to God, because Jesus Christ ended sin, Satan, in the grave, which is what we're going to get into all the way from Adam until today.